Before we start, if you enjoy the story, please leave a like and check if you're subscribed. The blood wasn't human. David Cale noticed it the moment he descended the cargo ramp, his boots clanging against the grated platform of his ship's hold. The Nomad had just finished a 17-hour burn through the outer reach, and his entire body ached with the particular exhaustion that came from pushing aging thrusters past their recommended tolerances. He'd been running contraband medical supplies to the Rim colonies for 3 years now, and he knew every creak and groan of his ship's skeleton, every shadow that belonged in the cargo bay. This shadow was new. The smear began near the portside bulkhead, a thin trail of something dark and viscous that caught the overhead work lights with an oily sheen. Not red, blue-gray, tinged with something that made his stomach tighten. He'd seen enough blood in his Navy days to know the difference between human and alien, between accident and violence. His hand went to the plasma cutter holstered at his hip. Not a weapon, officially, but it had saved his life twice in situations where official weapons would have gotten him killed. The trail led deeper into the hold, past the stacked crates of synthetic antibiotics and stolen surgical equipment he wasn't supposed to have, past the jury-rigged coolant system that kept everything from cooking in transit. His pulse kicked up, not quite fear, but the heightened awareness that kept smugglers alive. Stowaways were bad news. Injured stowaways were worse. Imperial plants were the kind of bad news that ended with interrogation cells and memory wipes. He followed the blood to the aft maintenance crawl space, where the environmental controls jutted out in a tangle of pipes and conduits. She was wedged between 2 primary ventilation ducts, her body folded into a space that shouldn't have fit a child, let alone someone her size. Froze. She wasn't human. That much was obvious from the pale blue-gray skin, visible even in the dim work lights. But it was the hair that stopped him cold, brilliant crimson, cascading in waves over her shoulders and across her face, stark against the muted gray of the ducts. And the ears. 2 pointed, fox-like ears rose from the sides of her head, covered in white fur tipped with black. One folded back against her skull, while the other twitched weakly toward the sound of his approach. Velkari. The word hit him like a physical blow. In 200 years of coexistence, humanity had never successfully negotiated with the Velkari matriarchy. They didn't trade, didn't communicate beyond terse military exchanges, didn't acknowledge human attempts at diplomacy. They were a closed system, bound by neural linking technology that made every individual part of a vast collective consciousness. And now, one of them was bleeding out in his cargo hold. His first thought was the bounty. Velkari didn't leave their territory, ever. If one was here, alone, injured, the Empire would pay a fortune for her. Enough to clear his debts, buy a pardon for the smuggling charges that kept him looking over his shoulder at every station. His second thought was the plasma cutter in his hand, and how quickly he could reach his comm to report this before she woke up. She opened her eyes, amber gold, luminous even in the shadows, with vertical slit pupils that contracted sharply as they focused on him. Not the glazed confusion of someone waking from unconsciousness. Alert, aware, afraid. He'd seen that look before, in a mirror, the night he'd deserted the Imperial Navy, rather than follow orders that would have made him something he couldn't live with. Raw, unguarded fear that came from knowing you were cornered and had nothing left to bargain with except your willingness to die on your own terms. She didn't move, didn't reach for a weapon or tense for an attack, just watched him with those predator's eyes, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths that suggested pain and exhaustion in equal measure. "You're Velkari," he said, not a question. His voice came out rougher than intended, scratching against his throat. "Yes." Her voice was low, resonant, with a slight harmonic quality that made the single word feel layered. She spoke standard, flawless standard, not the broken syntax he might have expected. "You are David Cale. This vessel is registered as the Nomad, Class 4 cargo hauler, flagged for customs violations in 3 Imperial jurisdictions." He blinked. "You did your homework." "I had 3 weeks to study potential escape routes." She shifted slightly, wincing as the movement pulled at whatever injury she was hiding, her second ear folded back against her crimson hair, flattening completely. Your ship was the only one in range with a pilot unlikely to report me immediately. Is that right? He kept the plasma cutter visible, angled down but ready. And what makes you think I won't report you now? I don't. She held his gaze, unflinching. You will calculate the value of my capture against the risk of harboring me. The Empire is offering a substantial reward. You have debts, you have warrants. My surrender would resolve both. Sounds like you've got it all figured out. I have had time to consider the probabilities. Her bio tattoos, he could see them now, intricate crimson patterns that flowed across her temples, her cheekbones, down her neck and across her bare shoulders, flickered weakly, pulsing in erratic rhythms that didn't match her steady voice. I cannot offer you more than the Empire. I have no currency, no leverage, no allies. I can only tell you that I severed from the collective 23 days ago, and they have been hunting me since. The words landed like stones, severed from the collective. It shouldn't have been possible. The neural link was implanted at adolescence, a biological integration that made separation fatal, or so every Imperial briefing claimed. You cut yourself off from the hive mind, he said slowly. Yes, and you're still alive. For now. Her ears twitched, independent movements that betrayed something her controlled expression didn't. The collective considers me corrupted. Imperial intelligence considers me a strategic asset. Both will kill me in different ways. I am simply choosing which death I prefer to avoid longest. Davin exhaled, a long breath that did nothing to settle the decision forming in his chest. He should call it in, right now, secure the bounty, clear his name, get back to the manageable problems of evading customs and keeping his ship flying. But he couldn't shake the look in her eyes, that fear, that defiance. He'd worn the same expression 6 years ago. You've got until we leave the station, he said finally, holstering the plasma cutter. Convince me you're worth more than a pardon. Her ears lifted slightly, swiveling forward, not quite hope, but something close to it. I will try, she said. He turned away before he could second-guess himself, heading back toward the cockpit. Behind him, he heard her extract herself from the crawl space with pained efficiency, her movements barely audible against the ship's ambient hum. He'd made his choice. Now he just had to figure out how to live with it. Davin ran the pre-flight sequence with mechanical precision, his hands moving across the control panel while his mind worked through scenarios he didn't like. The station's automated systems pinged his console, routine custom scan, nothing unusual. Yet. But if Imperial intelligence had flagged his ship, and if they knew what was in his hold beyond the medical supplies, he had, maybe 20 minutes before boarding teams sealed the docking clamps and turned his escape into a cage. Behind him, Sareth moved through the cockpit with unsettling silence. He'd expected her to collapse, to need medical attention, or at least rest. Instead, she'd followed him forward, studying the Nomad's interior, with the focused intensity of someone cataloging exits and weaknesses. Her ears swiveled constantly, tracking sounds he couldn't hear, the hiss of pressurizing airlocks, the distant clang of cargo loaders, the rhythmic thrum of the station's life support cycling through another rotation. You said you'd convince me, Davin said without turning. Time's running out. She didn't answer immediately. He heard her move to the engineering station, the faint whisper of her boots against the deck plating. When she spoke, her voice carried that same harmonic resonance, but there was something else beneath it now. Uncertainty, maybe, or calculation. There is a tracking beacon in your port cargo section, she said. Subcutaneous frequency, Imperial Intelligence Standard. It has been active for approximately 4 months. His hands stilled on the controls. Bullshit. I am monitoring 17 separate communication bands. The beacon is transmitting your location every 6 hours. You have been under surveillance since your supply run to the Hadrian colony. The Hadrian run. 4 months ago, just after he'd moved that shipment of restricted antibiotics to the mining settlement, he'd thought he'd gotten away clean, chalked up the lack of pursuit to luck and incompetence. But if intelligence had been tracking him all along, letting him operate while they built a case... Show me, he said. Sareth moved to the cargo monitoring panel, her fingers dancing across the interface with surprising familiarity. She pulled up a frequency spectrum he'd never bothered to check, narrowed the band, and there it was. A steady pulse, buried in the background noise, transmitting a location packet every 360 minutes. Son of a bitch! He stared at the readout, fury and cold pragmatism warring in his chest. Where? Integrated into your primary coolant manifold, designed to explode if tampered with incorrectly. I can disable it without detonation. Why would you know how to do that? Her ears flattened slightly. Because I installed similar devices for the collective when we needed to track defectors. The Empire's design is less sophisticated. The admission hung in the air between them. She'd been an enforcer for her people, hunting down others like her, and now she was offering to save him from the same trap she'd once helped set. Do it, he said. She moved quickly, dropping through the access hatch to the engineering crawlspace with predatory grace. Davin watched the cargo monitors while she worked, tracking the station's scanner sweeps and the growing cluster of security transponders near their docking section. 2 minutes. 3. His leg bounced with restless energy, every nerve screaming at him to burn out now and deal with the beacon later. Then the signal flatlined. Clear, Sarath called up from below, initiating thermal reset to mask the removal. Davin didn't wait. He engaged the undocking sequence, overriding the automated delays with the kind of manual control that would flag him for review but get him moving before anyone could question it. The Nomad shuddered as the clamps released, and he fed power to the attitude thrusters, rotating them away from the station with agonizing slowness. His console lit up. Incoming transmission, priority channel. Commander Voss's face materialized on the screen, all steel gray efficiency and cold blue eyes. Nomad, this is Imperial Intelligence. You are ordered to maintain position for immediate inspection. Can't hear you, Commander, Davin said, routing non-critical power to the engines. Bad connection out here. Must be solar interference. Mr. Kale, if you attempt to flee, we will designate you hostile and respond accordingly. Yeah, well, he pushed the throttle forward, feeling the Nomad's frame groan as acceleration pressed him back into his seat. I've been designated worse. He cut the transmission and angled them toward the nearest jump corridor, pushing the engines past every safety margin he'd sworn to respect. Behind him, Sarath pulled herself back into the cockpit, her bio-tattoos flaring bright scarlet against her pale skin as G-forces hit her harder than they hit him. She gripped the co-pilot's chair, her claws extending involuntarily to dig into the upholstery, but she didn't make a sound. The station's defense turrets opened fire. Davin threw the ship into a spiral, trading speed for evasion as tracer rounds stitched the space where they'd been a heartbeat before. The Nomad wasn't built for combat. She was a cargo hauler, tough and stubborn, but not fast, not maneuverable. He had to thread them through the debris field that ringed the station, using the wreckage of old mining equipment as cover, while the turrets tracked and fired. Boarding drone, Sarath said, her voice cutting through the chaos with perfect clarity. Starboard approach. He saw it on the scanner. Small, fast, magnetic clamps already extending to latch onto the hull. If it attached, they were done. It would cut through the airlock in minutes and flood the ship with armed boarding teams or nerve gas, whichever was more convenient. Can you reach the starboard maintenance port? He asked. Yes. Then do it fast. She moved before he finished speaking, disappearing aft while he kept them spinning through the debris, every near miss with a chunk of twisted metal making his teeth clench. He heard the maintenance hatch cycle open, felt the brief pressure change as atmosphere vented into space, and then nothing. 10 seconds, 20. The boarding drone's signal vanished from his screen. Sarath returned to the cockpit, her hair whipping around her face as she moved, her eyes bright with something that might have been exhilaration or combat reflex. Her claws were extended, dripping with hydraulic fluid, and sparking with residual current from whatever she'd ripped out of the drone's core. Clear, she said. Davin hit the jump drive, feeling the engines scream in protest as they folded space around the Nomad's frame and launched them into the corridor. The station disappeared behind them, replaced by the disorienting blur of faster-than-light transit that always made his stomach drop and his vision narrow. They'd made it. He slumped back in his chair, adrenaline draining away and leaving exhaustion in its wake. Beside him, Sareth sank into the co-pilot's seat, her ears drooping and her bio-tattoos fading to dull rust as whatever had driven her through the fight bled away. The silence between them felt heavier now, more real. He'd just burned his last bridge with the Empire, and she'd just proven herself more than a liability. But the question neither of them had answered still hung in the air, unspoken and unavoidable. What happened next? Davin stared at the navigation console, watching the jump timer count down their transit. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than he intended. "You saved my life back there." Her ears twitched, swiveling toward him. "You saved mine first." "Yeah, well." He ran a hand through his hair, feeling the greasy stick of too many hours without sleep. "Now we're both fucked." She didn't answer, but when he glanced sideways, he caught the faintest curve at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, something closer to grim solidarity. They had 14 hours until the jump completed. 14 hours to figure out what two exiles did when they'd both run out of places to hide. He had a feeling it wouldn't be enough time. The jump corridor spat them out near the Kessler Belt, a region of shattered asteroids and abandoned mining infrastructure where questions weren't asked and Imperial patrols rarely bothered to venture. Davin set them on a slow drift toward a derelict relay station he'd used before, the Nomad's engines cooling from the burn while he tried to calculate how much fuel they'd just wasted on survival. Sareth had retreated to the cargo hold after the escape, and for the first few hours he'd let her. He told himself it was pragmatism, giving her space, letting them both process what had happened. But the truth sat heavier in his chest. He'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross, and now he had to figure out what to do with a Valkyrie fugitive on a ship that could barely support one person, let alone two. He found her in the aft section, sitting cross-legged on the deck with her back against a coolant conduit, her crimson hair pulled over one shoulder while she examined her hands. Her claws were retracted, but he could see the faint tremor in her fingers, the way her ears kept swiveling toward sounds that didn't exist. "You okay?" he asked. Her head turned, those amber eyes finding him in the dim work lights. "I am functional." "That's not what I asked." She considered him for a long moment, her ears tilting forward slightly. "I am experiencing disorientation. Separation from the collective leaves gaps in sensory input. Your ship feels too quiet." He leaned against the bulkhead, keeping enough distance to not crowd her. "How long were you connected?" 26 years, since adolescence." Her bio-tattoos pulsed weakly, barely visible against her pale skin. "The collective is constant. Shared consciousness, shared purpose. Individual thought is permitted but filtered through the network. Emotion is channeled, distributed across thousands. Alone, everything is." She paused, searching for the word. "Louder." "Yeah," he said quietly, "I get that." Her ears swiveled toward him, curious. "You were military." "Imperial Navy. 8 years. Left 6 years ago when I figured out that following orders meant doing things I couldn't justify." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the admission. "Turns out the Empire doesn't like deserters." "So we are both traitors to our respective collectives." "Guess so." He pushed off the bulkhead, moving closer. "You hungry? I've got ration packs. They taste like recycled protein because that's exactly what they are, but they'll keep you alive." "I would appreciate that." He retrieved the rations from the galley locker, 2 packs of nutrient paste that he'd been stretching for weeks. When he returned, she'd shifted position, making room for him to sit beside her. He handed her a pack and watched as she examined it with the same focused intensity she applied to everything, reading the label with those slit pupil eyes before carefully opening the seal. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the ambient hum of the ship and the occasional ping of cooling metal. It should have been awkward, but it wasn't. Just quiet, companionable, almost. "Why did you sever?" he asked finally. Her ears flattened against her crimson hair, a reflex he was learning meant pain or distress. "The collective issued a directive, my clutch sister. The term translates poorly, but she was raised alongside me, trained in the same cohort. She questioned the efficiency of a military engagement. a minor deviation, a suggestion for alternate strategy. The collective designated her corrupted and ordered her termination. Serath's voice remained steady, but her claws extended slightly, scraping against the deck. I was assigned to execute the order. Davin's chest tightened, and you refused. I fled. I severed the connection rather than comply. She turned to look at him, and the raw vulnerability in her expression made him forget to breathe. The collective does not tolerate individual choice that contradicts consensus. My sister was executed by another enforcer. I became what she was, corrupted, dangerous, expendable. He didn't think. He reached out and covered her hand with his, feeling the cool smoothness of her skin and the sharp points of her claws against his palm. She stiffened, her ears shooting upright, but she didn't pull away. You made the right call, he said. I do not know what the right call is anymore. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper, that harmonic quality making it sound like two people speaking at once. Without the collective, I have no framework for moral certainty. I am adrift. Welcome to being human, he said with a rough laugh. We're all just making it up as we go. She studied their joined hands, her head tilting in that bird-like way she had when processing something new. Humans seek physical contact without reproductive purpose. I have observed this in your entertainment broadcasts, but I do not understand the mechanism. Why does touch comfort you? He should have let go. Should have given her some textbook answer about social bonding and oxytocin. Instead, he found himself trying to explain something he'd never articulated before. Because it reminds us we're not alone, he said. Because sometimes words aren't enough, and you need to feel someone else there. Solid, real, proof that you matter to someone beyond yourself. Her ears tilted forward, fully engaged now. She turned her hand over, palm up, and traced the scar on his forearm with one retracted claw, a feather-light touch that sent electricity down his spine. Show me, she said. His pulse kicked up. Show you what? How humans connect. Her amber eyes held his, open and curious and terrifyingly sincere. I want to understand. He should have said no. Should have kept the professional distance that made sense for two fugitives sharing a ship. But when she looked at him like that, all defenses stripped away, he couldn't remember why distance mattered. He shifted closer, closing the space between them until their shoulders touched. Her skin was cooler than his, smooth and strange and utterly alien. He lifted his free hand slowly, giving her time to pull back, and touched her face. His rough, scarred fingers against her sharp cheekbone, feeling the faint pulse of her bio-tattoos beneath his palm. Her eyes widened, pupils dilating, and her ears swiveled forward completely, focused entirely on him. Her breath caught, and he felt the tremor that ran through her, something between fear and fascination. This, he said quietly, connection, trust, letting someone close enough to hurt you and believing they won't. She leaned into his touch, just slightly, her crimson hair falling forward to curtain her face. Her hand came up to mirror his gesture, cool fingers against his jaw, exploring the texture of stubble and skin with careful precision. I understand, she whispered. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged, and Davin felt something shift in his chest. Something that had nothing to do with pragmatism or survival, and everything to do with the way she looked at him, like he'd just taught her a new word in a language she'd been trying to speak her entire life. His console chirped from the cockpit, shattering the moment. Priority transmission, encrypted channel. He pulled back reluctantly, his hand sliding away from her face, and saw the disappointment flicker across her features before she locked it down behind Velkari control. I need to check that, he said. She nodded, her ears drooping slightly. Of course. He made his way forward, his skin still buzzing from her touch, and pulled up the transmission. Commander Voss's face filled the screen, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her, displayed on monitors, was a complex frequency map, and at its center, a pulsing signal that matched Serath's biosignature exactly. Voss's voice was cold, clinical. Mr. Kale, I'm sending this on a channel I know you monitor. Your passenger is transmitting her location through a partially active neural implant. She may not know it, but she's been leading us directly to you. The collective has been tracking her since she severed, using residual link activity. Every ship she boards, every station she visits, becomes compromised. You're not harboring a fugitive. You're carrying a beacon. The transmission ended. Davin stared at the screen, ice flooding his veins. Behind him, he heard Sereth enter the cockpit, her footsteps uncertain. Davin? Her voice carried a note he'd never heard before, fear, real fear. He turned to face her and saw in her widening eyes that she'd heard everything. Her bio-tattoos flared brilliant scarlet, her ears pinning flat against her skull. I didn't know, she said. I severed completely. The implant was supposed to be dead. I didn't. You've been transmitting. His voice came out flat, all warmth drained away, this whole time, leading them right to us. I would never. Her claws extended, defensive, desperate. If I had known, I would have told you. I would have. Would you? The words tasted bitter. Or did you just need a ride and I was stupid enough to give you one? No, her ears were completely flat now, her whole body tense. Davin, please, I am not lying to you. But the damage was done. He could see it in her eyes, the way she'd already started to retreat back behind Valkyrie walls, putting distance between them even as she stood 3 feet away. And he could feel it in himself, the familiar ache of betrayal, of letting someone in and getting burned. Trust, he'd told her, believing someone won't hurt you. He'd been wrong before. Davin set course for the nearest habitable moon before he could second-guess himself. The decision formed with cold, brutal logic. Drop Sereth somewhere with enough supplies to survive, then lead the hunters away. Clean break. Tactical. The kind of choice that had kept him alive this long. She didn't argue, didn't plead or rage or try to convince him otherwise. She simply watched him plot the course with those amber eyes gone dull and flat. Her ears drooped against her crimson hair, her bio-tattoos faded to pale pink like dying embers. When he told her to gather what she needed, she moved through the cargo hold in silence, packing rations and a survival kit with mechanical efficiency. The moon was a barren thing, barely terraformed, with a thin atmosphere and surface temperatures that would kill slowly instead of quickly. He landed in a sheltered canyon, the Nomad's struts crunching against rocky soil, and helped her unload the supplies without meeting her eyes. There's a cave system 300 meters east, he said, his voice rough. Should keep you warm enough. Water reclamation unit in the kit. You've got maybe 2 months of supplies if you're careful. I understand. Her voice carried no inflection, that harmonic quality muted to something flat and defeated. Thank you for bringing me this far. He should have left then, should have climbed back into his ship and burned out before the guilt could take root. But something made him turn back, made him look at her standing alone in the canyon with her survival kit at her feet and her ears limp against her skull, looking smaller somehow than she had when he'd found her bleeding in his cargo hold. For what it's worth, he said, I believe you, about not knowing. Her ears twitched, just slightly. It does not matter what you believe, the result is the same. Yeah, he said, I guess it is. He left her there. Lifted off without looking back, pushing the Nomad hard toward open space, while his chest felt like someone had corded out with a plasma torch. Alone on the ship, the silence was suffocating. No sound of her moving through the corridors, no swivel of those fox-like ears tracking sounds he couldn't hear, no crimson hair catching the work lights. He'd made the right call, the smart call. It felt like cowardice dressed up as survival. The transmission came 3 days later, routed through channels he'd almost forgotten existed. Dr. Amara Solis, a name from his Navy days, a xenobiologist who'd abandoned her Imperial research position to work the Rim colonies. Her face appeared on his screen, older than he remembered, with silver threading through her dark hair. Davin Kale, she said. I tracked a Valkyrie biosignature to coordinates you recently visited. I'm hoping you can tell me what happened to her. She's alive, he said. I left her on Theta Carinae 4. Why do you care? Because her neural implant is still partially active, and it's killing her. Solis leaned forward, her expression grave. The collective isn't just tracking her, Davin. They're trying to forcibly reconnect her to the network. The process creates massive neural feedback, seizures, hallucinations, eventual brain death. She has days, maybe less. His hands clenched on the console. She severed completely, cut the connection. She tried, But Velkari neural architecture includes redundancies. The collective can reactivate dormant pathways remotely, forcing a reconnection. They've been using her as an experiment, studying how individual Velkari consciousness adapts to isolation. She was never meant to survive long enough to matter. The words hit him like physical blows. Sarath hadn't betrayed him. She'd been a pawn in a larger game, used by her own people and hunted by his, and he'd abandoned her to die alone because he'd been too scared to trust that maybe, just maybe, she'd been telling the truth. "How do I stop it?" he asked. "Complete surgical removal of the implant. I can walk you through it remotely, but it's dangerous. The procedure could kill her, and even if it works, she'll be vulnerable. The collective will send enforcers once they realize she's truly severed." "Send me the coordinates. I'm coming back for her." He pushed the Nomad past every safety limit, burning fuel he didn't have to get back to that barren moon in hours instead of days. When he landed in the canyon again, his hands were shaking on the controls. He found her collapsed in the cave she'd mentioned, barely conscious, her bio-tattoos flickering in chaotic patterns across her skin, while her body convulsed. Her ears were pressed flat against her skull, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Sarath. He dropped to his knees beside her, pulling her into his arms. She was too light, too cold, her skin clammy against his. "Stay with me. I'm here. I'm not leaving." Her eyes opened, unfocused, pupils blown wide. "Davin?" "Yeah, it's me." He held her closer, feeling her heart hammering against his chest. "I'm gonna fix this. Just hold on." Dr. Solis walked him through the procedure over comms, her voice steady while his hands shook. He laid Sarath out on his jacket, using the survival kits, medical supplies, and tools he'd improvised from ship components. The implant was buried deep at the base of her skull, a mass of biotech and neural tissue that pulsed with residual current. Sarath screamed when he started cutting, her claws digging into his arm hard enough to draw blood, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. He talked her through it with a steady stream of reassurances he half believed, watching her bio-tattoos flare in violent bursts of scarlet and gold, while her body tried to fight both the implant and his intervention. When he finally extracted the device, a slick organic thing that sparked and died in his hands, she went limp, her breathing shallow but steady. Her bio-tattoos settled into slow, regular pulses, her own rhythm, not the collective's. He pulled her back into his arms, cradling her against his chest while his own heart tried to remember how to beat normally. "You're free," he whispered into her crimson hair. "You're really free." Her hand found his, claws retracted, fingers threading through his with surprising strength. "You came back." "Of course I came back. I'm an idiot, but I'm not that much of an idiot." Her ears twitched, lifting slightly from her skull, and when she tilted her head to look up at him, there was something in her expression that made his chest ache. "Why?" "Because you made me remember what it felt like to believe in something other than running," he said. "Because I'd rather face whatever's coming with you than spend another year alone and safe. Because..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "Because you matter to me, more than I wanted you to." She reached up, her cool fingers tracing the line of his jaw the way she had before everything fractured. "I do not have the collective to tell me how to feel anymore. Only myself, and I choose you." The kiss was tentative, careful, neither of them quite sure how to bridge the gap between human and Velkari, but willing to try. Her lips were cooler than his, her breath carrying a faint metallic tang, but when she leaned into him and her ears pressed forward in what he'd learned was contentment, everything else fell away. They broke apart when his console chirped. Incoming vessels, multiple signatures. Velkari and Imperial both converging on their location. "Can you move?" he asked. "Yes!" She pulled herself upright, her bio-tattoos pulsing in vivid crimson waves. Not flickering, not dying, alive. They made it back to the Nomad with minutes to spare, Davin half carrying her while she kept watch with those predator eyes. Inside, he strapped her into the co-pilot's seat and fired the engines, feeling the ship groan under the strain of another impossible burn. Behind them, Velkari strike craft and Imperial interceptors dropped into the canyon, converging on the cave where they'd been. Davin angled them toward the upper atmosphere, threading through weapons fire with the kind of reckless precision that came from having something worth surviving for. "Where are we going?" Sereth asked, her voice stronger now, her hand steady on the console as she rerouted power to shields. "Uncharted space," he said, "beyond Imperial territory, beyond collective reach. Somewhere we can figure out what two exiles do when they run out of places to hide." Her ears swiveled forward, alert and engaged. "Together." "Yeah," he said, and felt something settle in his chest that might have been hope. "Together." They jumped to hyperspace with both fleets scrambling behind them, the Nomad carrying them toward a future neither could predict, but both had chosen. In the co-pilot's seat, Sarath leaned her head against his shoulder, her crimson hair spilling across his jacket, her bio-tattoos pulsing in steady rhythm. No longer the collective's heartbeat, but proof that she was alive, that she was free, that connection didn't require surrender. Outside the viewport, the stars blurred into streams of light, carrying them forward into the unknown. And for the first time in 6 years, Davin Kale wasn't running away from something. He was running toward it,